Good evening. I'm First Selectwoman Eden Windheimer. The time is 7:01 p.m. and I call this town meeting to order. Town Clerk Christine Gallagher will read the warning of the meeting.
Notice is hereby given that a special town meeting of the town of East Granby, Connecticut will be held in the Senior Community Center on Tuesday, February 27, 2024 at 7 p.m. for the following purposes. 1, to elect a moderator. 2, to consider and act upon the appropriation of a sum not to exceed $33,000 from the Capital Non-Recurring Fund to the Police Department as recommended by the Boards of Selectmen and Finance. Any unexpended funds are to be returned to the Capital Fund. Consider and act upon the ratification of the contract between the East Granby Board of Education and the East Granby Administrators Association as recommended by the Board of Education. Dated in East Granby, Connecticut, this 14th day of February 2024, signed by Eden Windheimer, First Selectwoman, Stephen Hall, Selectman, Amanda Thompson, Select Person. A copy of this notice was posted on the town signboard on February 22nd, 2024, and a copy thereof was posted in the February 22nd, 2024 edition of the Hartford Courant.
Next order of business is the election of a moderator. Do we have any nominations for a moderator?
I nominate Lisa Andorra as moderator.
Second?
Second.
Any other nominations? May I have a motion to close nominations?
Move to close nominations.
Second? All those in favor of closing nominations signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nomination is now closed. Nomination of Lee Sandora as moderator. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Mr. Moderator.
All right, well, thank you everybody for coming out tonight. Do some town business here. A couple of motions we have for tonight. We'll get started by reading the voter eligibility. In order to vote at town meetings, you must be an elector of the town or a citizen of the United States of the age of 18 years or more who jointly or severally is liable to the town for taxes assessed against him or an assessment of not less than $1,000 on the last completed grand list of the town. And also I just want to remind everybody that if you're not a town resident, you can't be voting tonight. So you know that. Okay, for the first motion, I do have the first motion to be brought forward to the town meeting tonight. Do we have a motion?
I move the adoption of the following resolution. Be it hereby resolved that a sum not to exceed $33,000 from the Capital Non-Recurring Fund to equip a police vehicle and with any unexpended funds to be returned to the Capital Fund as recommended by the Boards of Selectmen and Finance.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Do we have a discussion on this motion? Favor, against? See no discussion, so we'll just go right to a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion is carried. Thank you. For our second motion, a motion to bring forward to the town meeting tonight.
I move the adoption of the following resolution. Be it hereby resolved that the town accepts the contract agreement between the East Granby Board of Education and the East Granby Administrators Association for the period of July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2027 as recommended by the Board of Education.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I think we have a presentation tonight for the Board of Education. Would you like to try all this?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. My way up here, but I will not use the podium.
You don't have to.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Kyle McLean. I'm an attorney. I represent the Board of Education and have now for many years. My pleasure to be here with you again tonight. I was here about a year ago talking about our teachers' union contract and our negotiation of that contract. And so I'm back. Now the School Administrators Association, the contract that was recently negotiated, agreed between the board and the bargaining unit and the union, and is here for you to entertain your vote tonight. So I have a brief presentation on some of the details about that contract and the negotiation process. So an overview, the current administrators union contract is a 3-year contract, expires this June 30th. 3 years is the typical length of a certified staff contract here in the state of Connecticut. You'll have some 2, you might have every once in a while 1 year, some 4 years, but typically 3 years is the length of the contract. This year we negotiated in the fall, a committee of the board, the negotiations committee, met with the unions committee, which was generally all members of their bargaining unit, 5 weeks. This bargaining unit is, as I said, the administrators unit, so that is your certified school administrators below the level of superintendent. So this, your group here in East Granby consists of 7 positions. It's your high school principals, sorry, not your high school principals, your school principals. Your high school principal is one of those. Your high school assistant principal and 2 director positions. The salary plus insurance costs, which are the big economic items we think about when we're looking at contracts, and what is promised in those contracts are salary and insurance. So the cost of funding those positions throughout the year is, the figure's up there, but just over $1.2 million. Going in, I put a bullet there at the end, so going into negotiations, when we're looking about how those salaries, which is the biggest figure, salaries about 88% of that figure. Insurance, we do comparisons, both the union does theirs on their own, the board, we do our own with certain comparable metrics. We did that, so going in, we knew that 6 of our positions, 7 positions were a little below average as compared to each other through those metrics. So I just note that's sort of the background when you enter into negotiations. So we did settle contract, like I said, after 5 weeks. We did that without going to mediation or arbitration. There's a set of state laws that apply to exactly how a contract is negotiated. Here in Connecticut, we have a binding arbitration process where the contract's not settled by a particular date, which is based on your town budget process. Then you have to go to mediation. If you don't settle mediation, you have to go to binding arbitration by a certain date. So you might see in the private sector where there aren't strict requirements like that. So we did reach an agreement before having to go through that mandatory mediation, paying a mediator to come and sit with us, or going to arbitration and paying a 3-member arbitration panel. So the new contract we agreed on is another 3-year contract, but as I said before, it's the typical length of a contract. The dollar figures on that, which are often the most important when you all are entertaining a contract. When we look at the salary and insurance cost increase over that 3-year period, worked out to an 8.85% increase. That is $110,000, just over $110,000 over 3 years. The salary cost portion of that was a 10% increase over 3 years, about just under $115,000. And so if you're doing the math in your head, that's savings on the insurance costs because of some adjustments that were made in the insurance provisions. And these are just kind of a summary. I have a few more slides to get a little more into the details, but some key other components, non-economic, what we call language items in the contract. We agreed to reduce the number of personal days from 6 to 5. Right now, there are 6 personal days in addition to sick days and vacation days. We reduced those to 5, and we also reduced the way that they can be used or are required to be used. Right now, the contract has a somewhat complicated set of language that says you can use it for certain types of reasons and purposes and what we casually refer to as categories. We did away with that and left it up to the approval of the superintendent rather than having to basically go through this administrative process of fitting a personal day into a particular category. maximum sick day accumulation from 200 days to 225 days. That is comparable to other districts. Just like I said, all the salaries, we look at certain comparable districts and metrics. We did that with sick days too. And so we agreed to increase those days. By law, you're required to allow accumulation up to at least 180 days. We also added it's really a retirement benefit. It's adding payment of up to 9 days of unused vacation in the year of retirement, as long as notice is provided by January. So it provides a nice little retirement benefit to the employee, but it also gives notice to the district and also gives some incentive for that retiring employee not to just use up all their days as they're retiring. It's often important to have that person there for transition purposes. Gives them incentive to hold on to those days. And we revised the annuity contribution. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So getting back to the salary costs, this is just a little bit more in depth. As I said, just the salary taken by itself was a 10% increase over 3 years. The current salary cost figure is 1.1 million. So that 10% increase was broken into the 3 years, broken down into the 3 years, 3.25, 3.25, 3.5. You can see the dollar figures there. As noted up top, it was just under 115,000 over the 3-year period. When we look at salary increases, both sides, again, the union and management, when we're negotiating, we look at where do we stand in regard to the state average for that negotiating year. So the average by last count, last information I have is about 9.34. We were at 10%. We found that we were below average in a bunch of different positions. So we came in at a higher salary figure to try to correct that. The difference between 10% and the average of 9.34 in our contract is just under $8,000. So it may seem like big numbers, but given the total salary figure cost line item, it ends up being relatively small. And if you think about our unit of about 7 positions, and you're comparing in some cases to other districts that have 2 high schools and multiple schools and twice that or more positions. So while we use percentage increase to try to come up with a comparable figure across districts, it's not always the best because the dollars behind that aren't reflected in that. I just noted here, compared to your teacher's contract that was negotiated last year, that was also a 3-year contract. That was 11.8. And the dollars involved with that contract, because it's a much better unit, we have many more teachers. That last year's salary cost figure was 7.7 million, and the 11.8% increase reflected a $950,000 increase. So that gives you an idea of how the 2 units compare. Insurance, as I noted, we had a small insurance savings reach that was through adjustment of the premium cost share. So you have the insurance plans, they each have a premium that has to be paid for the plan, and there's an agreement in the contract in most certified contracts as to how that premium should be shared between the board paying for that and the employee paying a share of that. So we adjusted those premium shares by 2.5% over 3 years. There's a 1% increase to the employee taking on an additional share of that cost. Also in the second year, and then 0.5% in the third year. You can see down below there's a comparison as how the board's 3 different bargaining units and their contracts account for the premium share costs and where they are right now. There was no adjustment to the dental premium cost share. It's at 30%, which is, you can see, is relatively high, so we kept that as is. Some other language items that are economic in nature, I just noted here, as I had said earlier, in the summary, we made a change to the annuity contribution system. The first was that the current language in the contract has a sort of longevity-based or years of service-based contribution to an annuity that administrators can receive, which is common for administrators' contracts in the state. It was based on years of service is anywhere to 3.5% after your first 2 years of employment. Rather than having a varying amounts, we agreed to meet in the middle and just make it a flat 3%, so it wasn't necessary to track where everyone was in years of service, when they started, what they were coming in with, what kind of experience they had before, and made it a flat 3%. Some other changes, if you have a health savings account, because you have opted into the high deductible health plan that the board offers, there's a funding, 50% funding of the deductible that can be received. We just changed the dates that is funded. To be consistent with the other bargaining groups, they get funded in September and February. September aligns with the school year. February 1st gives a little more breathing room from the end of the fiscal year to make that contribution. Another economic-based thing, we made a small change to long-term disability insurance plan that's offered. If anyone knows what an elimination period is, and an LTD plan, that's how long you have to wait or how long you are out of work before you can start receiving benefits under that LTD plan. We changed that from 90 days to 100 days, which is 180 days, which is consistent with the same plan that's offered to the teachers. A few more, so major language revisions, not purely economic. As I mentioned earlier on, we made the change to the personal leave, reduced the days from 6 to 5, did away with the categories and just retained superintendent's approval. Sick leave, we made the change of increasing the total accumulation from 200 to 225 days that you can accumulate over your career. Then there's that retirement vacation day payout, which I went over. A few other additional language revisions. This contract's only 19 pages long, so it's not a super long contract, not a lot of details in there. A few more, we memorialized an existing policy when administrators on days school is closed can work from home with permission or approval of the superintendent. We added some language making it clear exactly how we calculate with a per diem, what previous days they'd rather work, what that's worth, how it's calculated. We just clarified some language around holidays. There was an appendix of holidays, things that are paid holidays in the back. There's some somewhat inconsistent language in the actual contract, so we made that clear. And we added some language around that annuity contribution that has to do with contributing it to an elective deferral, which is essentially a more beneficial way for the administrators to receive that contribution in terms of their credit towards their in the teacher's retirement system. No cost to the district, but a much more beneficial way for it to be reflected in their teaching record for retirement. All right, so those are the changes to the contract. Here at the end, I just always give a summary about what happens here if you don't approve, if you reject the contract here tonight. As I mentioned earlier, there's state law that covers the whole negotiation process. It's called the Teachers Negotiation Act. The administrators are considered teachers under the law. Applies to them too. So if you reject this contract, we'd have to go into binding arbitration. It's a 3-panel arbitration panel by law. We go there. The board, the management, the board, the negotiating committee, whoever representing the board, and the union have to agree on open issues. One thing that happens if the contract gets rejected, so we had between the two parties come to agreement on a number of different issues, such as salary, insurance, those personal days. All of those things are considered open as soon as the contract gets rejected. They can all be put on the table, so to speak, for consideration during arbitration. And how arbitration works by law, and it's not necessarily would be the case in other forums, but it's a last best offer situation. So one side says, here's our offer on this, it's take personal days, we want to change it to 3 days, and another says we want 8 days, and the arbitration may also pick one or the other. They can't meet in the middle, they can't make changes. So there's a lot of strategy, a lot of work that goes into that kind of thing. And then the big thing with arbitration, it's called interest arbitration. Doesn't happen a lot in the state. Contracts are, like you said, 3-year contracts. We have over 160 districts in the state, so there are lots of contracts open, being negotiated every year. Very few, maybe one goes to arbitration. Oftentimes they get settled. We might technically go into the arbitration process because of the law, but they're really sort of settled. A lot of that is because it can be very costly, arbitration. There's 3 arbitrators, so each side's responsible for the cost of one, and then they split the cost of the third. But those arbitrators can charge about $2,000 a day. You usually have somewhere 3 to 4 or more hearing days, depending on how many issues. And again, you may not know how many issues you have coming up until you get closer to arbitration because everything's open. So the cost can be anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000. It really depends. And then just at the bottom, we say the results can be uncertain because of that situation that I went over. And a lot of times the result doesn't change. So an arbitrator can consider the fact that the parties, in this case, they agreed on everything going into arbitration. And so they might just say, hey, it looks like everyone was comfortable with these positions. So we're gonna give you what you had decided on these issues. It sort of depends on what those last best offers are. But that there is some deference given usually to the agreement of the parties. And that's all I have.
Questions, right?
Yeah, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah, so if there's any questions, please stand up and your name and
John
residence.
Welsh, Griffin Road. Attorney McLean, if it were to be back to arbitration, would it have to come back to the town meeting and would have to come through the same process? What would happen if it went down a second time?
If it goes to arbitration, the arbitrators they'll release a binding decision, and so that's going to be binding on the town.
Any other questions for Kyle? Going once, twice? Okay, Kyle, you're off the hook. Okay, any other comments on the motion on the floor? Yes, Bob.
I'll make a comment.
State your name and
Bob Paskowitz, 1 Church Road, East Granby, Chairman of the Board of Education. I'd like to commend the administrators, the Board of Education, the negotiating team, Mark Andrews, who was chair of the negotiating team. They work together on this. This isn't easy. They spent many hours, many nights working at this. The Board of Education agreed to it. The numbers make sense. And you saw what happens. I mean, I know people tell me all the time, well, should be offering 0. You look at what happens in arbitration and it becomes very costly. And if it's not settled by us, it's out of our control. So I think it's a settlement that works. It's in line. It brings our administrators up in line with districts around us. They do a lot of things. We only have 7 of them. And this contract's worked well. But these guys and women put in a lot of hours to put this together. And I think they brought a good package to the community of Wilson Board of Education. Thank you.
thank you, Bob. Anybody else? This is your time to, talk about whether you like this motion or not. No, hearing none. Okay. All right, so I think we're going to take a vote, and I think we could probably do it just with voices. So all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Okay, the motion carries. It is passed. All right, so the last thing is a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you. Is there a second? All those in favor of adjourning, say aye. Aye. Opposed? I don't think anybody opposed. All right, thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
Good work. What's up?